Meeting of the Town of Maynard Planning Board. It is May 23rd, 7:08 p.m. We have a full board in attendance tonight. A couple of things on the agenda, but I think tonight we'd like to start, we'll skip right to item 3, the open table update. Just a brief introduction, I guess. I think this will be.
Just in advance, I think you may have run a site meeting for.
Oh. Just as part of the 2016 decision, the open table was asked to reappear before the board on an annual basis for an evaluation, provide an update. So this is your chance. It's been 1 year. Welcome back.
Thank you. We have little to say because we haven't opened our doors. We'll be opening on August 7th. So I think the review is about third-party use, and there's not even been one-party use. So.
Right. Yeah. No. I recognize that, and I understand that we asked you just because that was what the condition had said. So so I don't really know if there is much more to talk about at this time. I think maybe just to consider if we would then postpone your next appearance from perhaps a year from when you open.
Yeah, I think that's
from
reasonable.
this date,
Okay.
if that seems appropriate.
It's the board's pleasure. I mean, the purpose was to evaluate, if there was anything that needed to be adjusted. We don't have anything to go on at this point.
Okay.
So if that's fine with you, I mean. Yeah, okay. And I guess if you just are in communication with Bill, perhaps when you open, we can, confirm the date, I guess, of when you officially open, and then we'll just do 1 year, revisit it once a year from that date, if that works for you. Any comments, any other comments?
I think that's reasonable.
So I guess I'd like to move that we, well, let's see, ask for the open table group to, that the calendar, I guess, that for the open table to return to the board for review be 1 year annual from their opening date as you communicate with the town planner.
1 year from the opening day.
Second. All in favor? Thanks very much. Thanks for coming in. Okay, so now we'll reopen the four public hearings that we have for the 129 Parker Street project, the site plan review, and the 3 special permits for drive-through use, multifamily dwelling, and continuing care retirement community. How are you tonight?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, David Cook, Maynard Properties LLC. Just by way of background, on the 9th, we had addressed operations, certain aspects of traffic, landscaping, as well as exterior architecture. Tonight we have 5 items to address. The first we would like to start off with is some traffic from a working meeting that Jason Sobel of Green International had with the town. Next we'll hear on operations from Katie Keefe of Capital Group Properties, who will address certain revisions to the property management and maintenance plan that was discussed at the last meeting. After that, we'll hear on lighting from Valerie Williams of HFA. We'll get into photometrics, security lighting from dusk to dawn and the like. After that, she'll also address the architecture, the exterior architecture for the buildings 6, 7, 8, and 9. And lastly, we'll get into the phasing and the sequencing of construction. So, Jason.
Very good. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board, members of the public, and good to be back again. At this point, as everyone is well aware, we've covered extensively traffic both on-site and on-site at the 129 Parker site. So I'd like to provide just an update tonight based on a working group meeting that we held with Bill Nemser, town planner, Wayne, our town engineer, I'm showing it here just for reference and to refresh everyone's memory of what we were proposing to do here. Really, the idea at this intersection in this residential neighborhood was to reduce the pavement width, better define travel lanes, and introduce an all-way stop condition at the Old Marlborough Road, Marlborough Street intersection as a way of traffic calming and discouraging cut-through traffic through the neighborhood. Based on discussions that we've had with the town engineer and the peer reviewer, we now have a modified design or modified concept as shown here. And really, it's a similar idea. Again, narrowing of pavement. These green areas here are areas of existing pavement that will be reduced. And again, an all-way stop sign at Old Marlborough Road and Marlborough Street. The key difference here is that instead of Marlborough Street sort of teeing up to Old Marlborough Road, which was previously a through movement, now any vehicles that would come through from 117 to Parker Street would have to stop and then take a left turn to continue. So it's a similar kind of a concept, similar goals, but everyone sort of thought that this was going to go a little bit further to discourage cut-through traffic through the residential neighborhood. So, you know, updating these plans, we've submitted our plans to the town engineer, and they've been peer reviewed, and we've received a lot of comments on that, most of which are very detailed in nature, engineering design details. And so when we address all of those comments in our engineering plans, we'll be resubmitting the engineering plans for this intersection to reflect these concept plans that we've drawn up.
Do you mind putting that one down, or putting the the old one down, just so that we all can see the difference?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment?
Sure.
So, the origin of this revised sketch that Jason is presenting is based on our analysis, understanding that, and I actually do want to hear from the public here if they have any comments. If we could turn it over to them or something.
Mm-hmm.
But our understanding is modifications at this location were desired based on trying to eliminate cut-through traffic in 117, right? And while this, the current proposal on the bottom of the diagram, on the bottom of the bottom figure, if you will, and I don't know if the public can see that or not, Jason, but
This is
just
the
hold it up.
version.
Yeah. So that was in the original, in the previous 2006 and 2009 approvals, is that sketch. The more we looked at it and we tried to analyze and understand the cut-through traffic, we feel that, we as traffic engineers feel that that didn't really address the cut-through traffic as well as this modified sketch. And so I'd like to ask the board, your opinion on that. And at the same time, I'd like to ask the audience their opinion on that, because I think it's important to understand these are the people that have to live with this configuration, and it'd be nice to know what they prefer. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the map. We don't have a bigger sort of context map, do we?
No, not here. So on all these graphics, north is to the right, and both Marlborough Street connects straight up to Route 117.
Yeah. Okay.
And Old Marlborough Road also then kind of curves up north and also connects to 117.
Got it. So if one were to try to cut the intersection of 27 and 117, they'd be coming from Old Marlborough in the lower right.
Correct.
And going.
They'd be coming
right
from here and then turning left to continue on Old Marlborough. And as the board may recall, we were doing other intersection improvements at the Old Marlborough Road, Great Road intersection to discourage cut-through traffic, as well as at the intersection of Old Marlborough Road and Parker Street. And on top of that, we're also doing some traffic signal improvements at the Great Road Parker Street intersection, including that westbound left turn lane and checked left turn Ks with the green arrow. And all that is sort of in conjunction to discourage cut-through traffic through this residential neighborhood.
Does have any other questions?
I think it's an improvement.
Just for clarification, and maybe to you as well, maintenance of the green area, it's town property, right?
Correct.
Is it are we expecting that the adjacent residents would take care of that?
To be determined, I guess.
To be determined. Are there any grading issues related? I mean, I assume this, what's shown in green is all paved now, so it's all kind of generally level. Are there grade issues or drainage issues?
I believe that area is relatively flat, but I'll ask Jason, he's looked at it probably from a design perspective closer than I.
It is relatively flat. There are a couple of catch basins sort of in this area, one over here as well as one over here, I believe. Generally, we're not going to be changing the drainage system. None of this area is curb. Basically, what we call country drainage, just sheet flows off the road onto whatever's next to the road. And certainly with the reduction of the impervious areas here, we'd have less stormwater runoff.
Are you proposing to mill and overlay the asphalt in?
Yes,
So everything that's indicated in the gray is replaced asphalt?
that's correct.
So you'd have some flexibility to regrade to move water to,
Right.
like,
right.
the
And-
green area, for example?
And that'll be part of the design that Wayne, as town engineer, will be looking at. Again, or we'll be reviewing again after we do that design.
No comments from the board. Any comments from the public? Sorry, Megan.
Oh, I just, as a member of the public, really, because I live on Old Marlboro Road, and I'm thrilled with this redesign. I think it's really gonna make a big difference, so thank you for everyone and your work on that.
Ken?
So, one of the concerns would obviously be signage, somebody coming up from the south on Old Marlboro Road, not realizing that Marlboro Road would turn right then. I'm assuming you can take care of that with signage, just to clarify that, you know, instead of continuing straight through that intersection, to continue on Old Mar, if you're trying to find an address, you're gonna continue straight through there, and you're just gonna have to create signage there. But again, that would be a simple thing. I have to say, this was one of the, when we went through this with the site plan review in 2009, this is one of the stickiest issues that we had, because we could not figure out. I find myself shaking, you know, nodding my head the whole time I see this, because I think this is a really good way of calming the traffic in that area. I recollect, only because I was I was on the board when we did the development on Falcom Lane, that the drainage, stormwater drainage down there is a real issue, even under the best of circumstances. That obviously would be taken care of, you know, when you look at the specific plans and stuff like that. But that drainage in that area is a really tough thing. So I think this is a great alternative. I think it's going to accomplish everything we were hoping it would accomplish in this. So just drainage and the signage.
Any comments on signage, Jason? That's just, you would imagine taking care of that?
Yes, you know, I think certainly we'll have new street name signs that are retro reflective, that they're bright, so at night, you know, you'll be able to see them with your headlights and.
Well, probably some directional or something like that, you know, like with you know, you see a sign underneath with a right turn. You know, if you're coming along Old Marlboro there, seeing some sign that says right turn to Old, you know, continue on Old Marlboro, more than just regular street signs. But again, I think that's easy to do.
Yeah, it's certainly something we'll look at and evaluate. We discussed with both the town engineer, excuse me, and the peer reviewer to determine what's most appropriate and for a residential setting like this.
Yes, sir. Can you, sorry, for everyone, for comments, if you can just state your name, please, for the record.
Paul Grimes, Field Street. It'd be nice to have a representation of Marlborough Street at 117, North Street, South Street, and D Street tying into all of that. And then,
Would the board like me to go through the previous concepts that I talked about at previous evenings?
But if I can just ask for clarification, you're
in
just,
other words, put that representation earlier on this whole thing instead of feeding us piecemeal. I mean, you just got this intersection here. What are you gonna do at North, South, and D to tie this all in?
well, so I think this was just revisiting one specific issue that had been, brought to our attention as part of a larger presentation. If you have a specific question, we can, call up some of the other plans. I think it's my,
That information's already been presented. I'm sure Jason will be glad to show it again, but that's already been presented.
and it's my understanding too that this is the one outstanding issue. That's why we're seeing it again right now.
That's right. We're only talking about changes that have come out recently, as Jason mentioned at the beginning.
And those other intersections are in your traffic study, the other,
Yes,
For
they were
reference
monitored
from-
in the traffic study,
Okay.
as well as in the off-site plans, the concept plans presented before this board,
Mhm.
as well as the detailed engineering plans that have been reviewed by the town engineer.
Jason, do you have those on you there? Just not to be elusive for this gentleman, maybe just, if you could just show him what was previously discussed, just so there's complete transparency.
Sure. So for context here, this is Parker Street. North is to the right. The project site and sort of the site plan is at the top of the page. And we've got the improvements here at the primary site drive with the traffic signal, with the southbound right and the northbound left. Here is B Street on the west side, or on the east side of the road rather. South Street and North Street and Field Street. So at North Street and Field Street, at the existing crosswalk at that location, we're proposing rectangular rapid flashing beacons. At the South Street intersection, we're maintaining that existing crosswalk and we'll be restriping that after we repave the road in that area. B Street, we understand that there's an existing crosswalk at that location that we didn't think was the best location for it because of, it'll come right in the middle of the transition as the southbound right turn lane is developing. So as a result, and as what's been discussed previously in front of this board, Capital Group, the applicant will be constructing a sidewalk along the east side of Parker Street between the site driveway and South Street. And that way, any residents coming along B Street, they'll get to the sidewalk on the east side. They can either walk south to the primary site driveway and cross at the signalized crossing, and there'll be an exclusive pedestrian phase there, or they'll be able to walk north on the east side of Parker Street to the crosswalk at South Street. Another change that came up through the peer review process that isn't reflected on these plans, but something that we've discussed already in front of the board and the applicant has committed to, is an additional crosswalk across Parker Street at the Old Marlborough Road intersection. And that crosswalk will also be having the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, the RRFBs. And that way, the crosswalk at the northern and southern end of that corridor sort of both have the same pedestrian crossing treatment to sort of bookend the area, which can raise general awareness that pedestrians will be crossing in this area. And then in addition to that, for this short stretch of Old Marlborough Road that we are reconstructing, we'll be constructing a new sidewalk along the north side of Old Marlborough Road. I think the gentleman from the public also mentioned the Old Marlborough Road, Great Road intersection, and if the board would like me to flip to that, just to recap that really quickly.
can do it real
That-
quick, just so we get a lot of topics.
Sure.
So,
Thank you.
Excuse me? I should have watched a previous meeting.
So at this location, the basic idea is to eliminate the pavement in this area here and create a conventional T intersection. We think that this will certainly help discourage any cut-through traffic through the neighborhood. Certainly any vehicles turning from 117 westbound onto Old Marlboro Road. Today they can do that at relatively high speed because it's at a pretty soft angle. And vehicles in the future will be forced to slow down to make that turn. The existing time restrictions for do not enter will be maintained with clear signage on both sides of Old Marlboro Road there. And no real update to relative to what was presented previously to the board here.
Thank you. There was a question in the back.
Not to belittle the point, Michelle, Ruth Field Street, how come you didn't continue the sidewalk on the previous plan to North Street, you stopped it at South Street? There's just lack of room there? And there's so much foot traffic crossing from North to Field Street, that's where the majority of pedestrians that get hit.
Well, again, we have the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which should improve both the safety and visibility of pedestrians crossing at that location. The sidewalk that's existing on the west side of Parker Street will be reconstructed throughout the entire project site, so it will be a continuous sidewalk along the west side. The sidewalk on the east side is really meant primarily to accommodate pedestrians that can currently cross at B Street, and because of the roadway widening, we're not suggesting or recommending it to maintain that crosswalk, and therefore we're building out sidewalk between South Street and the site drive to facilitate the existing pedestrian access that's there.
Sorry, Marie Gunderson, 119 Concord Street. I will concur that the new design looks better than what we've seen before. That's great for that area. I'm just going to repeat that in previous planning board meetings and at town meetings, residents in that area have been in favor of the development, gung-ho, but they don't want to have to bear any of the cost. These are all public ways, and I would like to see an equal amount of care and expenditure for those directly affected as those being affected a block or more away through some sort of mitigation, whether fencing or landscaping for those people who are right there. And I do want to point out also that this area, the whole area is a residential area. To refer only to Marlborough Street, Old Marlborough Street is a residential area. Those are all private homes, driveways directly on to Parker Street. So this is a residential area as well, and I don't think that should be forgotten.
Thank you. Okay.
Before we move on from traffic, one more quick point in terms of an update that I'd like to provide. At a previous planning board meeting, a member of the public had raised a question about traffic signal improvements at Great Road 117 at Main Street. And at some point in the past, a previous version of the MOA that was signed, that intersection had been included. In the most recent version of the MOA signed by the applicant in the town last September, no mitigation was included at that intersection. Although the project will have minimal impacts at that location, it generally operates very well. The applicant has agreed to do some minor traffic signal upgrades, essentially replacing the green circular indications for the Main Street approach with green arrows for that right turn. It's that soft right that the vast majority of traffic coming down Main Street takes that right. So that is an additional area of mitigation where none was previously proposed, and I hadn't previously discussed it in front of the board. I don't have any graphics for that.
It's
such a minor.
It's just signals only and no layout to the
Sure.
ground plane. And this was in negotiation with Wayne and his team?
Yes, it was a comment that the peer reviewer and Wayne had raised, and we discussed it at the meeting last week, at that meeting that we had on Wednesday, and we'll be implementing that as well.
Mr. Chairman, that will be added as a condition of planning board approval. Bill and I have already worked that out.
Very good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next up, we are going to hear from Katie Keefe, Capital Group Properties, to discuss operations and revisions to the main.
Good evening, Katie Keefe from Capital Properties. So I think that everybody's getting all these updated packets from today.
Yes.
I
Do
went
we have
through
some
and
in the, sorry, do we have some in the audience, or any?
Do we have any additional people?
If we want to circulate. Here, Bill, circulate this one.
Thanks, Andrew.
You can always get you more.
It's just for the folks in the audience right now,
Just give
yeah.
them out and then let them pass it around.
Thank
So
you.
I'll just go through what was changed from the last meeting. On page 2, we made some updates to the, page 2 and 3 actually, the delivery hours. You'll see for the retail and the residential, we are gonna mandate that deliveries are done between 7 and 7. The only exclusion on that we noted in the residential area would be, takeout food deliveries. Something small, a pizza truck, that's pretty much it.
Sorry, for everyone's recollection, is it correct that you had had a notation in there about recommended or strongly encouraged
Right,
previously?
on the previous version for the retail tenants and the restaurant area tenants, we were going to recommend that they urge their delivery companies to deliver between our time frame, but we are gonna make that mandatory now. When we meet with all the tenants when they come in, it will actually be part of the lease that they signed with the property, that those delivery hours are mandated by us. Again, that applies to the retail, the residential, the restaurant area. The only exclusion would be the grocery store, who has a little bit different operational schedule. Those I did get on the previous version. It was a little bit vague. It said all before 9 p.m. I was able to get definitive details that the grocery and frozen food comes between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. So it's not early morning hours for the bulk of their deliveries.
Previously, that was 7 a.m. and 9 p.m., or what was?
It didn't have a specific start time. They just told me that it was all before 9 p.m. So they were able to give me an actual start time
Thank you.
on this version. On page 4, and then.
And I'm sorry, also, the perishable food delivery, what was the previous?
That has not changed.
The 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. has not changed?
Correct.
Okay.
On page 4, we added in a truck and delivery map that is also included as the last page in your packet, and there's large maps up on the boards here. There was some concern in the last meeting that we wanted to specify for which tenants delivery trucks would be entering the property. So this map shows that for the grocery store and sites will, exit into enter the property from the north entrance. They will all exit out through the main entrance of the property around the rotary.
So just to take this diagram a step farther, it would seem then that the truck route on the north site entrance, those are all serving retail uses?
Correct.
So that would be 7 to 7, the use of that. That's what you're proposing.
That would be retail, and there may also be some restaurant in the front there. So that would be retail and restaurant, which I believe
Which
you're correct, is gonna specify 7 to 7.
Okay. And then, the, as far as deliveries to, the continuing care and the apartment buildings, would that, is there I understand the hours clearly, but is there an entrance that you're specifying for that use, for those buildings in the southwest that are not colored?
I do not have information on that today. I don't know if that's something anyone else has. If not, that's something that I can find out and follow up with you guys on. I don't have that information.
Does the board have precedence as to where they enter?
Mr. Chairman, may I comment on that?
Please.
It would seem logically, looking at the layout, that the entrance from the front entrance, for delivery vehicles would make more sense to access both of the apartments and the continuing care facility. It seems more direct access and a less,
From,
confusing route, if you will.
from Digital Way, from the,
Yeah.
the central?
I think that would be
I
preferred
agree.
from my perspective as well.
Okay,
I think that makes sense.
great. So we'll follow up with you on, to make sure that that's indicated. We can revise that plan also to show that.
And then the grocery, obviously, the purple, that is the 1 AM to 5 AM.
Correct,
And, and 3 PM to 9 PM.
correct.
Thank you.
Right, on page 5, there was some changes to the language of the stormwater reporting. It specifies that we will oversee the stormwater management system to ensure that it's within both DEP and specifically town of Maynard compliance. And that we'll still contract with the licensed stormwater engineer to perform those annual inspections per the O&M plan, that's approved by the town of Maynard, and that the inspection reports will be forwarded to the town.
Okay?
And then the next time those changes is actually after, you have a number on the bottom, but it's after page 8.
Can I just ask one other question to Wayne? Are these changes in response to comments that you gave, or just based on the last
I think
meeting?
We had a working group meeting, and we did talk
Okay,
about some of these
okay.
comments at the working group meeting, so most of these come out of that.
Great, thank you.
I think I owe you some type of official comments on this, but we took advantage of the working group meeting
That-
and we did it that way instead.
That's fine, as long as you've given input into this.
And I'm satisfied today with the changes.
Thank you.
Seem reasonable.
Okay, so the next, update is on the snow and ice management plan. We made a few changes on the maps here based on, I think, some feedback from that working meeting as well as some of the public concerns. There was a previous snow melter location, I don't know the way it's written. Right, between R2 and R3 on the map here. We did eliminate that one. There was concern that it was too close to the residences on Field Street, so we did eliminate that. And then we changed some of the language in the snow and ice management plan to specify, it's mostly, bullet number 3, that accumulation of 8 to 10 inches of snow will be pushed off the pavement and stored in the snow storage areas marked in red on the site plan. Only if they become full and it's hindering the, tenants of the property, the visibility into their suite and any of their signage, would we then move snow into the green circle snow melter locations and prepare to utilize the snow melter only if absolutely necessary. And then bullet number 4, the accumulation of over 10 inches would be treated with a combination of snow melting and hauling off-site, again, if necessary. Any questions on the snow and ice management or the changes on the plan?
I do, I guess. I understand the plan and its limitations. It just seems to me a little bit like the largest swaths of pavement have the least amount of snow storage areas. That being the grocery store and especially the central retail. You had made mention of moving, not just pushing, but picking up and moving snow to the green areas when, you've got 8 to 10 inches or something like that. I just want to raise it up to Wayne if you've got concerns. It just feels like that big parking lot right in the middle is a lot of space.
Yeah.
And
I don't disagree. I don't think that the plan that they're proposing is uncommon from a lot of retail centers like
Mm.
this. Greg, I don't disagree with you. That is very, that's what it appears. You tend to not want large piles of snow in direct line of sight of your buildings and your customers and so forth. So that could be some of the reasoning, but I don't know if the applicant has any.
Yeah, I can just give you a general note. That is something that we experience. We do have many other retail strip malls, and that is feedback that I personally hear, especially with large storms, is that it hinders a lot of visibility, especially for big tenants that really want to make sure that people know that they're there. Not only blocking visibility of their signage, but of their front door. They really want to eliminate their patrons from being discouraged to enter the front of their premises if they can't really see what's going on or can't find parking. So we really try to accommodate them best we can with parking and visibility to eliminate those issues. Just one other note, we wouldn't necessarily be moving the snow from the snow storage areas into the green. It would be more of a 8 to 10 inch storm. That storm itself would be moved to those green areas in preparation for snow melting. That would be after the red storage areas have already become full. We would then be in discussion with the snow removal contractor to make sure that they don't continue to add to those piles, but that they would begin to move into the snow melting locations to prepare for that. I understand. I would understand the motivation to not want to have a mountain of snow in front of my store either. I don't see it as realistic necessarily. And I don't know if it's, if you're saying that you're not going to store any snow anywhere in that central parking lot, then, that's, I guess, yeah, you're going to have to provide that service or, maintain it in that manner, right? That's what this is saying. If you're gonna live up to it, then so be it, I suppose. It just doesn't seem very realistic to me. But I'm willing to listen to others' opinion.
When does the off-site snow removal take place? What triggers that? You said the plow, store, melt, and if necessary, cart it away. What would trigger that, the carting away of snow off-site?
It would just depend on severity of the storm. If we got several storms back to back, nothing was melting on its own, nature really wasn't helping us in any way, we'd be in communication with the snow contractor to make sure that there's eyes out there, and if we're reaching a point where, again, visibility is hindered, the snow areas are full, we would pull that trigger very quickly.
So in theory, if you're not storing snow in that front parking lot in front of the supermarket, then, and all the other retention areas are full and you're at capacity, then you're left with carting the snow away.
A combination of melting and hauling offsite, yes, definitely.
So are you concerned with, runoff at the locations that are?
Well, that's, I mean, I am, that's another question, I guess. It just seems to me that, in a minimal storm, you'd be, in the case you outlined, you'd be hauling snow off site. And, I mean, I guess if that's, what you're suggesting, I just going from what I know about it, I guess, even 1 or 2 inches of snow across that entire parking lot, you push it all the way to one side, and I mean, it's quite substantial amount of snow. And, again, if you're committing to not storing it anywhere in that zone, then that's a commitment, I suppose, but it strikes me as unrealistic, but.
Mr. Chairman, we can look into that further in terms of what the capacity would be for that red zone that's along where the stormwater basin is, as well as down on the other side of the building. Just in terms of, in relation to the amount of accumulation there would be, how much could that plausibly hold until you get to that reaching capacity, right, where you then would have to take it off or melt it or what have you. We can certainly go back and review the plan.
I think it's probably worth doing that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, to the chairman's point, I mean, if this is the plan that gets approved and included in his reference in the decision, right? So if you guys have larger storms and you're violating this, technically, that's an offense that the board or the zoning commissioner could call you guys on. So I think we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah, so
So
we
it
can come back.
probably would be better to rethink it a little bit and see if you want to show some additional areas that potentially, even though it's not desirable, at least you can place it in some of those retail zones.
Right, and see if we can come up with something in terms of sheer capacity, more specificity as to that, and how much snow can be held.
Another concern I have, I guess, is, well, in 2 areas, one adjacent to the wetland in the east part of the site, and one adjacent to the stormwater basin in the center of the site. Are there concerns, Wayne, that you would see with large snow storage areas immediately adjacent to those stormwater basins and buffers, not wetlands, but wetland buffers, in the case on the east side, that we should be considering?
And like the melters as well, right? Like,
I see one melter in the 100-foot buffer. And again, this may be covered by Concom as well when they take, do they?
We'll certainly have comments on this, obviously.
Yeah.
And, this is revised plan, we haven't really looked at this as
Mhm.
part of the stormwater design. We're waiting for a resubmittal on that stuff, so we can look at it comprehensively. To answer your question on the center basin, so just remember that center basin's lined.
Mhm.
There's no infiltration there, so it's actually not a bad place for it to melt into, because it's gonna treat the full capacity of the system to treat any contaminants.
Mhm.
I do share your concern with the buffer zone stuff.
With that center basin being lined, it really is, it's a critical part of the stormwater system. I imagine the maintenance of that basin is covered, or will be covered in, because I imagine with snow, you've got garbage and all kinds of stuff that will get into that basin.
Salt.
Yep.
The salt, of course. So,
And Mr. Chairman, we actually had addressed quite a bit of this last night
Mhm.
before the ZBA, with regards to that special permit.
Mhm.
In fact, this is in a Zone 2 water supply protection district. And so Nathan Mohannan had addressed those issues and actually had gone over, at least, although not complete just yet, the stormwater proposed plan that's in place in terms of the remediation, keeping it so nothing leaves the site. Also,
Mhm.
just by sheer elevation, where all the water will be to, actually going into. Nothing's going to be, there's not going to be any stormwater runoff into the wetlands, within the site. It is completely maintained, so.
I just want to ask also really quickly, what do you mean by common area in this plan, and how does that relate to the snow storage? Is there something different about that area?
It doesn't. It was, I believe that was indicated for other purposes in the O and M. It was talking
Okay.
about maintenance, like certain days of a week. It's not relative specifically to snow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
The next, the page right after the snow and ice management is something that we obtained from one of the manufacturers of snow melters, most likely the actual snow melter that we would go with. And there was a concern from the public for some decibel readings, so they were able to give us some comparisons relating it to a loader machine, a backhoe, and what those decibel readings would be 3 meters away, 9 meters away, and 15 meters away.
And, whoops. Looks like, I can't exactly tell, but I would guess that we're at least 15 meters away from any abutting residences, however, not 15 meters away from any of the proposed residences.
Katie, just for clarification, the SND 900, those are the two snow melters?
Yes.
In the middle.
Yes. And yes, just to clarify, we did go through the site plan and confirm that there were no residences within 15 meters and where the snow melters would be.
Anyone care to give any insight on how to,
It's not a lot of decibels.
okay,
60 some odd, right?
thank you. If we could get some kind of, we should try to look at some kind of a quantifiable relative,
I actually did look that
You
up
know.
in anticipation of that.
okay, great, thank you.
Just to give you an example, a dishwasher running is 70 decibels. And a refrigerator is 50.
No way. No way.
The dishwasher standing next to it, versus this thing standing 50 feet away from it. Well,
Concert in the barn.
we'll
110.
we'll take a closer look at getting a good comparison for that.
Yeah, and I would assume these examples are standing
Right.
immediately next to these devices, so.
Okay, thank you.
I believe other than the addition, the change on the map, getting rid of that one snow melter location and the addition of the truck turning map in your packet, that sums up the changes that were made to the operations plan.
Ordinary conversation 3 feet away is 60 decibels.
Okay. Wayne, do you have any other comments on this?
No,
Plan.
this is really the first time I've looked, so I do wanna look at this, but this is the first time I've seen it revised. I mean, it appears from first glance and from what Katie's describing, most of the concerns in the back.
Thanks. Any comments from the public on this plan? Oh. At the end of public comment? Okay. Sir, in the back. Yeah.
Thank you. John Breskingham, 11 Detling Road. I had a question about page 3, the delivery hours for the grocery store. Compared to the foods between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., that's typically full-time sleeping. We have a firefighter, a nurse, school teacher, that their butters, right directly behind the delivery area in the southern corner by the grocery store. I'm just wondering what kind of recourse there would be if 5 nights a week at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're hearing the beep, beep, beep of the delivery trucks and the slamming of the doors and everything else. I'm wondering what kind of recourse we would have in terms of noise or in terms of disruption, to see if that can be adjusted or changed. Again, Cambridge firefighter, nurse at Emerson, school teacher, directly behind the delivery area. Their bedrooms are actually right in the back side of their homes in that southern corner next to the grocery store. And the delivery area is directly behind those homes there. What, if anything, can be done if you hear these early morning slamming of doors and waking people up in the middle of the night?
Thank you. I assure you that we have yet to discuss this as a board, but I appreciate the comments. Ken.
So the materials here on Magic Salt, is this new material this week, or we provided this previously?
I believe we had this a few weeks ago.
Okay. Well, so I'm curious as to why this wasn't provided to the ZBA yesterday, because the ZBA had a lot of questions about Magic Salt, and there was no information provided about this. This information, by the way, so it basically comes down to being environmentally friendly, because one, it's pet friendly, and two, you have to use less of it in order to do that. It adheres better to the roadway, et cetera. There's no information in here about the environmental impact of collections of this downstream of the stormwater. And there's a lot of questions that we still have about stormwater management, about what about the efficacy, efficiency of the stormwater system, of making sure that de-icers and other materials that are used on the property don't end up downstream into the wetlands just to the west and south of the property, which are close proximity, I'll remind you, to one of the town's wells. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd like to, I would encourage the planning board to ask for detailed information on the efficacy of the stormwater management system and making sure that these chemicals stay on property or are processed before they head off property, and what the environmental impact of accumulation of these materials are. The second question I have has to do with the retention ponds, the 2 large retention ponds. So there's snow storage areas adjacent to those ponds. Does that mean that snow would not be put into those ponds?
Well, I mean,
because those ponds are actually part of the larger stormwater management. So
I would interpret the edge of the red bubble as the edge of the allowable area of snow storage.
yeah.
Practically speaking, that's a difficult thing when you're pushing a mountain of snow and that edge is over and on the far side of your visibility. So I think there's a practical challenge to making that work.
So these 2 ponds being part of the stormwater management system actually might be areas where you could put snow in order to, because because whatever goes into these ponds is supposed to be processed before it heads out off property, at least according to what the ZBA was told yesterday. So why aren't those 2 ponds being used as areas instead of relying on de-icers? Just a question.
Maybe, I think it might be helpful, Wayne, if you could give everyone a quick summary of where we are with the stormwater planning, just maybe high level? So, because I know that question is coming up.
Yeah.
We've yet to see really any detailed information, and my understanding is because it hasn't been prepared to a level that you're comfortable with yet.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. So, the applicant provided an initial stormwater management design as part of the original submittal. We had, several comments on that. We've had, at least 2 working group meetings relative to that. It appears, based on the discussions we've had to date, that the peer reviewer and the applicant's engineer are in consensus on how they're going to revise the design, and the design they're going to revise appears to meet stormwater management guidelines and DEP requirements. We have, to the chairman's point, we have not seen paperwork on that at this point. We've been promised that within the next couple of weeks, and we will subsequently review that.
And I'm not surprised because this is actually a pretty complex site in order to do stormwater management. So that, it doesn't surprise me at all that it would be a complex, it would take a while. This is not a normal project, okay? This is a large project, a huge project, that's sitting right next to, right in a water protection district, and right next to wetlands, so it is difficult. But the planning board has got to really understand the impact of this. And then I'd also say respectfully, the planning board also has to decide whether meeting the regulatory requirements is sufficient to protect the town's interests, okay? That may be. But it may also be that the planning board decides, or the ZBA decides, that it wants to put in additional protections. So.
Well, and just to kind of loop it back, not to take ourselves too far off topic, but I asked for that explanation because in my estimation, if, you know, I would ask the question of, at that time, when stormwater is ready to be presented here, if those basins are in fact appropriate for snow storage, you know.
Something tells me, and I'm not a stormwater specialist, so bear with me on this, I think it's discouraged to dump snow directly in storage basins. I'm not positive of that, but I think it's discouraged according to water quality.
So I believe that is correct in most cases because most retention ponds do not have this proprietary treatment system that the applicant keeps talking about. And so I would agree with the town engineer that in most cases that's not allowed. But we're told that whatever goes into the stormwater system will in fact be treated, although yesterday at the ZBA meeting, there was some discussion that based on an extreme storm, that system does get bypassed, which I think is another aspect that both the ZBA and the planning board need to take a look at.
Yes, sir.
Going back to these snow melters in their different positions, and these basins we're talking about, I gotta assume that the manhole that these are discharging into is going to these basins. Correct?
Yes.
So you're gonna have a tremendous amount of water sitting in there from these things. 'Cause they put out 50, 80, sometimes 100 gallons a minute. So you're gonna fill these basins up, and you're gonna try and put snow in there. Or you're gonna have all water in there, and how are you gonna treat that amount of gallons?
That's a good question.
You still dump it.
That's what they need to demonstrate.
Yeah,
And that's
so,
what the applicant has not.
Which, you know, this should have been kind of done.
No, that's what this part of the process is for.
No, I don't really believe that. It should have been kind of designed. We shouldn't be at this phase now. We should have already been here. There's a few
Well,
other things that are missing here, too.
certainly reviewing to that level of detail is our job here. So, you know, when the plans are at a level when they're ready, and you know, the operations, you know, the snow melting and the stormwater and everything are coordinated, then we'll have a look and revisit the issue. Marie?
So, I have two concerns on the snow amounts, just on that. When we talked about the extra volume, so if all of that is piled up, you know, and you have all of that volume and then it all begins to melt at the same time, will that also also overcome the treatment center. And what was said last night at the zoning board was, there are some things that are applicable to the planning board were pushed off in this direction. So, but as Ken said, it was discussed that there is the possibility of an overflow that flow directly into the wetlands. My other concern, of course, is the truck route on the north side. Observing that you have the largest number of buildings, the greatest amount of square feet serviced through that route. As compared to the south side, you have this grocery store significant, but just two smaller buildings. Just by eyeballing it, it would seem as if at least the buildings R5, R6, and R7 would be better served from the main entrance with less impact on either of the surrounding abutters, and it would be a less circuitous route as well. Because there's an entrance side right between them.
Don't mess with
Right off the
Don't
main.
mess with that.
And I believe that earlier there was some discussion about making that digital way, including, from the traffic circle back, the way it is to allow truck traffic in and out through there. So turning it all at the rotary, to me, precludes some of the use of that. But again, you have the vast majority of square feet serviced through one entrance, a much lesser amount through the other, and at least 3 of our buildings, I think, could be more easily serviced through the main entrance.
Thank you. I think, again, now looking at this again, not only, I agree with your point that 5, 6, and 7 make perfect sense to come in through the front entry, but I would also imagine that there would be potentially truck traffic serving the retail buildings coming from the south. Is that reason? In which case they would use the main entrance. So in fact, it looks like all of the retail would be using both entrances, most likely.
And they would have to, which is a and they would probably have to.
They would probably have to, yeah.
If they come in from the south.
Right. So, I mean, which I think alleviates pressure on that north entrance. I guess just for the sake of clarity in the diagram, that I would agree that, and I'm listening for other comments, but the top 4 buildings could be served by either the north or the south. 5, 6, and 7 probably should be serviced by the center, but all 7 could be serviced by the center. It seems to make sense.
It strikes me that functionally what will happen is that trucks coming from the north will use the north entrance, and trucks coming from the south will use the south entrance, and that'll be the real determinant, not their final destination. No matter what,
But I think that's what the purpose of this diagram is. Like,
I understand. I'm just saying,
are you saying
in practice,
just within the retail
I
scope
think
and
that
not within the grocery store?
even within the grocery, I think that, well, no, the grocery store obviously I think is a separate case, but I think for the retail portion, any truck coming from the north is gonna end up, no matter where their final destination is on the site, is probably gonna use that first entrance, and vice
Unless
versa.
they're directed otherwise, right?
Well,
Mr. Chairman,
you can direct people all sorts of ways, but I think human beings just,
You're gonna be giving your leasees direction on where they should be entering.
Correct. Right, so not only will these documents physically be included with the, upper level of management that's direct in lease negotiations with us, but on a management level, the people that are actually there receiving these deliveries are the ones who will go through this with me in person before they actually open.
I understand that, I'm just saying, when you kind of get down to human behavior,
Yeah.
people are gonna do what's most expedient in the moment, and chances are no one's gonna be watching or catching them every time, and so I just think we have to consider it in the light of what's likely human behavior beyond whatever is prescribed.
So, if I may, I agree with you. Mr. Chairman, and you're right, Mr. Board Member, and you're right. But the bottom line is, if there's violations that are known, those come up, and we notify them, and it may happen a couple times, but then it'll stop.
I'm just, absolutely, and all I'm doing is saying we have to consider it, I think, in the way that it'll probably go down.
Understood.
Hi.
Linda Thayer, Chandler Street. I thought at one point there was a discussion about no left turn onto that upper entrance. And,
It's only an enter only.
oh, no exit, but you can, but could you, so it's an entrance only?
You're correct.
It's a right
But
in.
wasn't there a discussion
It's a
about?
It's the southbound only.
Southbound right only, which means the plan that we were just discussing, weren't we just talking about
So yes,
where certain deliveries?
even if trucks are coming northbound, they wouldn't be able to make, if they have to go to those top buildings, they wouldn't be able to make the left turn lane, or left turn to get into that top entrance, if that's where they're required per the plan to go into. Is that what you're getting at?
Right, because we were just prior to that discussing sending them in that way.
Right, which is why I think the diagram just needs some clarification in that.
Right, because we're directing them to do what we've asked them not to do.
Correct. That essentially, yes, per the diagram right now, I mean, for anyone coming from the south, yes, they would be doing what we are telling them not to do. So I agree that I think we need to add in the option from the south to enter into the main entrance. But I think the key behind the diagram too is that the grocery store traffic is mandated to use the main entrance and will not use.
Correct.
That's your intention, I think, right in the diagram. Does that make, please?
The traffic
If I may
insurgency.
just add a little bit, and I know this has been discussed before the board as well. Certainly all the large delivery vehicles, the largest ones visiting the site would be traveling to the site via 117, most likely to and from 495, and therefore would not be coming up from the south.
Mhm.
Sudbury.
But that's likely and not 100% controlled.
Where, right,
There's no
where it
example.
ends.
Well, but I mean, I think from in my estimation of our kind of, the main entrance is preferred, right? So giving them the option to use the main entrance is a benefit to everyone, I think. Whether or not they may, at what percentage come from the north, or not.
So are you possibly what you could do is have the orange be main entrance or the north entrance?
Yeah, I think
And
essentially
then
the retail
purple
has
is
the option.
only the main entrance.
The retail deliveries have the option based on where they travel from.
Which is, yeah.
Retail or restaurants, whatever the
Yeah,
from the north.
retail restaurants.
non-grocery store uses are.
And the grocery store is prohibited from using this north entrance. I think that's the intention that we're trying to get to.
And
Right,
in
that-
any operating lease, that would be as a stipulation.
Yeah.
in essence. And to mimic what Wade said, that obviously would be something that would be enforced. If a vehicle trying to, or a tractor trailer trying to access the supermarket comes from the north and it's come to, come to Capital Group's attention, then obviously that will be addressed.
Mhm.
That would be something else.
Sir.
Thank you. John Bresnahan, 11 Detling Road. So if you look again at the snow map, and the red shade indicates where the snow is, you go again to the bottom right corner, to the Detling Road side, you can see that there's a big pile of snow going directly into the 45-foot landscape buffer area. There's supposed to be a 100-foot setback and a 45-foot landscape buffer. That snow is directly up against the fence or the rock wall, whatever's gonna be there. And again, as I understand it, there is supposed to be a 45-foot landscape buffer, so you're pushing snow directly into pine trees or whatever trees you might have there. And I thought that was revolting, and I didn't think that was something that was allowed.
I agree.
And that's a,
You're going directly into the 45-foot, it says right there, 45-foot landscape buffer. That's the area that, we have a 45-foot buffer area, the snow is going directly into that area. How can, that shouldn't happen.
again, I think that we will come back with a higher level of specificity and explain to you how, these, different, areas, these red zones where the snow would be deposited, how that will work mechanically, just so everyone's on the same page.
Right, okay, so we're gonna be getting a revised plan
As to snow.
that deals with buffers, large swaths of parking, and the stormwater. Thank you. Yes.
Karen Grimes, History. I do have a question, and it's actually, it's more or less an RFI request for information. While we're on the subject of, the truck route that's gonna be coming in,
Mm-hmm.
the majority of trucks will come, as you say, from 495 to 117 in. And when they see a truck route, they're gonna be turning in there. Hopefully at night for the supermarket, they will come in the main entrance. I know that that can be dealt with the supermarket. They're pretty fair, about that. But I do have, one request, and that is for, I would like some sound attenuation, and some mitigation along that highway that's gonna be behind us with these trucks. I submitted to the town planner and the selectmen, some information regarding the sound of what one of those, what's the, number of trucks, the big, the WB67, and the information that I have, and then especially with the snow melter, that's just about 70 decibels, and I put the website on here that you can all listen to it. It is like backpack blowers on steroids, and then you get the blowers going for the heat. It's very, very loud. And so my question is, we have, you know, the landscape buffers behind us, they're supposed to be evergreens and so forth. My issue is, and I submitted it to, the other boards, and I'm gonna give it to you again, I would like the, the name of this fencing company, this sound fencing that they put up between a residential area, and not the vinyl fence that's being proposed. This is, something that Ken Estabrook can speak to, because their board at the time, planning board, absolutely took this, and it was on site plan review. And I would like you to just look at both this and my, request for information. Maybe you can actually get people in at some point in time to, you know, as a representative, to tell you what this can do for a community, for all of us along that north, site there with these trucks, because they are loud. And there's no question that it can take it down. If you can get it below 50 decibels, that's tolerable. But anything 65 decibels and up is very extremely loud. And I can't wait for you to go onto this website right here and turn it up, and you'll understand, you know, what it is. I've also included a noise thing from the DBA that might help you with the decibel.
Mm-hmm.
So if you'd like some information, I'd like to leave it.
You can please leave it with, the town planner.
I'd like to do that.
Thank you. Yes.
Mary Gunderson, 190 Parker Street again. Although I would concur that I would suspect probably a majority of the traffic would come from the north, since every operation has its own logistics, there's significant, down in Wayland and Sudbury, and then further down in Framingham, and then there's the Mass Pike. There's significant retail areas south of us, and I can easily see a truck route that would say, okay, go service those areas, then drive up 27, pick up me, and then go up to Acton or Concord or that way. So I don't think it's inconceivable that there will be, trucks wanting to come from the south to the north. So you can't, but if the trucks are hook-footed from the manufacturer, they can't be turned off or removed. So, and I think most trucks have them these days. And then I just had a question, clarification. I heard 15 meters. I think the snow melters from the nearest residence. I wasn't sure if that was 15 meters from the line or 15 meters from the wall, or after the wall is the 15 meters referred.
There's a, I'm not sure if you were able to. The applicant provided some information, decibel readings from the snow melting equipment. One of the sets of measurements is from 15 meters distance. So then I just looked at the plan and made a guesstimate that the locations of the snow storage that they're proposing are greater than 15 meters from any abutting residence, not from any proposed residence, but from the abutting residence. So that yourself, others in the room would be well in excess of the 48 feet, just for reference and trying to evaluate the decibel level that was provided. No more comments? Any other comments? Did you want to? Yes, please.
Okay, I just had two questions I noticed on the last meeting, last time you were in here. First was about the street lighting, and I know it's very complete, but if we talked about providing the board a little more detail on the street light that was proposed, and as of the
I think that's coming up after me.
Good, okay, all right, that's good. And there was a note I had about groundskeeper 6 days a week, and that is something that, was that going to be inserted into the operations manual, or is there going to be somebody on it?
It is in here on page 3. It starts with common area and retail maintenance of all areas marked on attached site plans 6 times per week, by groundskeeper.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, can move on to the next topic if you're ready.
Lighting.
Lighting.
So next up,
Lighting.
we have Valerie Williams of HFA, who will start off by addressing lighting.
What is it? So, a conversation in a restaurant is 60 decibels.
Yeah. The subway, the train.
Oh, 100, like 110. Why is the ladies from the pool like so vocal? I mean, show me the first meeting I've seen them. Did they just move to Field Street?
You weren't here last time.
Over there.
Yeah, there were
Some,
last 2 times that there's been more.
and I wasn't here.
Yeah, but this particular, I don't feel like I've seen them before.
Thank you.
I need like a full size set.
Whoa. Small.
Seriously. This is not, 11 by 17 is not enough for this drawing.
Blue means you don't gotta worry
Is
about
some
it.
of it blue?
Are you colorblind?
No, it's just you have to get very close before it becomes distinct.
I'm not making
Color,
fun of the
color
color challenge.
impaired.
Sam is a color builder.
You can go look at that one.
Well, that's old.
I need to open some more now.
All right,
Hi,
so
thank you.
Valerie Williams with HFA Architects and Engineers. I was here 2 weeks ago to present buildings R1 through R5 and some of the lighting aspects of the project. And so I had presented the general photometrics for the site on this sheet. that's what this is, and I know it's hard to read, but I'll explain it. In general, the lighting after 1 will be to light the main entrance drive, the project, and the residential area. And then this back area here where there's a proposed health club tenant that's 24/7. And then lights that are sprinkled out through the site to provide general lighting so that there's no completely dark corners of the site. And so what this shows, and then also the code requires that 1 to 2 hours after a business closes, the light should be reduced by at least 30%. So what we're proposing is to reduce the lights that are on after 1 a.m. to 50%. And those lights that I just described are the ones that will be on from 1 to dawn. And then if you do look at the plan closely, you'll notice that in order to produce this plan, we just took the lights off the plan that are turned off. We just created a ton of work for the lighting designer. So that's why some of the lights appear to be missing, but they are still on the regular photometrics plan. So in general, the blue numbers, which is kind of hard to see, it all looks blue up there, but it's, this plan here has, all the blue is 0.1 foot candles or 0 foot candles. And so the plan before showed the perimeter all at 0. And now the 0 line moves further into the site on all sides. And then these green lines, they show light levels that are 0.5 foot candles. And those are the areas that we're trying to light for security. So that this plan shows an average of 0.2 foot candles with a maximum of 1 foot candle. And then there are some lights that are not in green. Right here, this light here. So we just picked some dotted spots around just so that there were no dark spots, like I said. But some turn out that they're below 0.5 foot candles, so they don't have a green line, but when you look at the numbers closely, you can see that there are some more lights than are actually shown in green. So that's the plan for after 1, but there's some flexibility in this. The lighting control package is by the manufacturer of the light fixture proposed for parking lot lights and the backs of the buildings. Schreider is the company. And the control package allows for zones so that different areas can be controlled all together. And the light levels can be dimmed to more than 50% or less than 50% as needed. Then also within the zone, each light fixture can be controlled individually. So if there's a problem light somewhere, that light can be fixed. It can be dimmed or turned off if it works out for everybody. Last time I was here, there was a question about the coolness or the warmth of the light fixture that's selected, the Hestia light. It comes in a standard 4100 Kelvin. So 5,000 is cool, 3,000 is warm, so it's in the middle. And then also there was a question about the lights that are on the backs of the buildings. We had the photometrics done with them at 20 feet, but they can be down at 15 feet. We'll just adjust the number as necessary. And then as far as the light fixture cuts that I handed out last time, I didn't get through all of them. I talked about the parking lot lights and the lights that are on the back of the building and the accent light fixtures. But the bridge that goes over the pond is going to have a linear concealed light under the railing. So it will have a nice
is a festive look for the center and an identity feature, at nighttime. There's also a flagpole. This isn't actually a good plan for pointing everything out. This one is better.
Valerie, can I just ask a question? I'm sorry, just for everyone's benefit. That photometric plan, I think it's important to note, because I know the audience may not be able to see that, but all your foot candle measurements at the property line is 0.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important thing to note.
Yep, yeah, it's 0, and that was after 1, but the other photometrics that was from, dusk to 1, it's at 0.
It's at 0 as well. Thank you.
So the flagpole that's proposed to go right here, it would have, a floodlight, so like that. The roundabout will have some landscaping in here that would be nicely lit, and, the monument sign, that's on the stone walls, those will have some, linear lights at the bottom of the sign.
So the flagpole, that's an upward facing light?
Upward, yeah.
24/7.
Yes, if the flag is left up here.
So I'm seeing on the operations plan that we have, I guess I think it's important if we take some of this information and feed it into that operations plan and clarify some of the language. In other words, you are saying that, say, for the retail area, that the site lighting goes off at 11:30. And what I heard here is that it actually it's dimmed at 1 a.m. So first point is that I would propose that for the retail area, that you consider dimming it at 11:30 or some time that's coordinated with this operations plan, and that you use the language dimming and not off. It's not going to go off. I guess I would also ask if,
Why wouldn't it go off?
well, I guess for
After
the,
say 1
for,
a.m., I mean, I'm fine with dimming, you know, I mean.
well, I'd say for the sake of coordination of the proposal, whether or not we
Okay,
think
okay,
that
okay,
it should
okay, I
go
see your
off,
point, I see your point.
we can talk about that.
All right,
But
sorry.
I guess, you know, for clarity, the other question that I have, I guess, is if any of the photometric plans have been presented to the police chief or anyone at the police regarding, you know, the question, is there enough light for, in their opinion, for public safety purposes?
Yeah, I don't believe that they're presented yet.
So- Hi.
Quick question if I can. You're talking about the R2 building potentially having a 24-hour health club. And I'm just looking at that, which is why you have some additional lighting in that parking lot. But as I look at that, between the parking lot and the building itself, there's a section that goes down to 0. So is this not counting building-mounted lights or other things that, it seems like there's a dark section between the patrons and the parking lot?
Yeah, so, like I was saying before, we just turned some lights off to make this process a little bit easier to provide this light. So the building lights got turned off with the overall plan, but yes, those buildings this building will have its lights on the front, so that will increase the light level. And then also I forgot to mention that each building's wall-mounted accent lights on the front and the back are, well, I'm not sure if it's the back too, but at least the front are controlled by the building itself, so that tenant will have some say in that.
So I understand it's complicated to run a photometric with, but I think that to me is important information here because it does speak to the safety. We've had the conversation before about the building lights and how much lighting they provide versus parking lot lights. So there is sort of a hybrid photometric that shows a more realistic lighting level when you include wall-mounted building lights plus parking and sort of complex-wide. So just for the board, I think there's a subtle overlay here that should be done to really make sure you're getting a comprehensive understanding of all the lighting at 1 in the morning, because there's some things here that are not reflected in this diagram because of the complexity of building lighting versus parking lot. So I just wouldn't, I would wanna make sure everybody understood this is partial.
Understanding that some lights are controlled by different parties, I guess. I guess I'd like to see, to whatever degree is practical, some consistency in that color temperature, certainly between the overhead lights, but also the low signage lights, and if there's something, memorialized in, whether it's in this, our conditions, or in the conditions translated into your, overall operations plan for the site, that, I understand there needs to be a tolerance based on you can't get exactly every temperature, but, within, there should be an acceptable range. If you're saying 4,100, then there should be some acceptable range where, so that everything is working together.
One other question, since you mentioned it. Signage lighting, is that also getting turned off at a certain hour? So it says Home Depot, does the Home Depot sign itself have to turn off separately, which is also a different control question?
So there's signage lighting, and then what I was thinking of, and your point's important, but I was talking about, I was also thinking about the wayfinding signage lighting, which I imagine there will be as well, right?
Yes.
So I have a question. So
Yes, please.
comments from Mark and from the chairman. So are we gonna have a plan that comprehensively shows nighttime operations? I guess when I asked for this, you did what I asked you last time, and I appreciate that. You showed the security lights. But to Mark, from the chairman's point, it sounds like there's gonna be other lighting. Can we present a plan? It sounds like maybe it's just a combination of something that's already been prepared. I'm hoping it's not a lot of work, but I think it would be good to have a plan like that as well, so that we understand the lighting, maybe not to the level of wayfinding lighting, maybe that's a little excessive, but building lights and et cetera, maybe that would be good to at least understand how that interacts with the security lighting.
Well, it seems to me that the main point of concern is the 24-hour gym building, whereas the residential, you can see, we're in the 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 range, so that's providing an appropriate amount of nighttime lighting for those folks. But it might just be as simple as providing, simulating that, or at the 24-hour building in the upper left. Just to clarify, I don't need to see photometrics on the wayfinding. I just think it'd be important just to understand if that will go off. I think it may be appropriate that certain wayfinding lights after a certain time could be just headlight, illuminated. But
And detail on where local and global control issues, where lights are locally controlled and where they're globally controlled.
So maybe it could be like a summary?
Yeah. I wouldn't imagine that's any kind of a diagram, sorry.
in terms of the actual illuminated signs, the logo types, Bill, would that be under the individual sign permits, or we can talk about that now? We should consider that now, or?
Presumably whether it's the signage light, an individual tenant, building light, or a site light, the board has the ability to dictate lighting of this level has to be on or off. It doesn't matter who has the light switch. You have the ability to say, this is what we are and are not accepting of when your lights are on or off. And then it would be up to the landlord, right, the property manager, to make sure that those people that have control of lights are then following the rules that have been dictated by the planning board. So, yes, it's within your purview to say, hey, sign lights and building lights have to be off at a certain time, but site lights can stay on. Right? That's up to you to make that.
Yes, I would
determination.
I would concur, and that's an important point, that it's up to the board to make sure what its preferences are.
Is there a proposal at this time that you're,
Well, I think the other important thing is that we are going to be seeking feedback from the Maine Police Department in order to get what their thoughts are in terms of safety and security, what lights, if there's going to be a 24-hour gym, what lights will be on and what brightness. That's definitely something.
do you have a position on the retail signage lighting at this point?
As of this point, no, we don't.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and there's this question I was gonna ask Mark, I understood we're gonna, devote a session to signage, and that would
Probably more than one.
Just,
That was my plan. And we say, I mean, obviously the applicant is presenting different information. I had assumed that there would be a separate and specific discussion about
So,
signage
yeah.
and lighting of signage and.
right, and to be clear, what my point is, I guess, there's signage, and then there's the retail signs where there's another process down the road for approval of that signage, and some overlap in between, and that overlap might include a general statement about illumination. It might, but I guess I'm just trying to
Guideline.
navigate that.
And again, Mr. Chairman, my understanding would be that the board has the ability to set, during this process, overarching guidelines that create certain limits. There will then be a discussion about individual signs, but presumably are not redebating.
Within those limits, yeah, right.
We've already established X to Y, now we're talking about within that, rather than each time having them come and have to debate, can my sign be on until 2 AM? No. The rule is X, and then you're, so
Yep,
that's my
I think
understanding
that's
of how
clear. Well,
Just so the board's aware that that application for a special permit, as to that part, it is found in the bylaws. That's to eliminate.
well, I think,
sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Well, there is as to the bylaws, there is a section that goes to illuminated signs. If that was what you were asking, what are you needing, what do you need to cite in terms of where would you get your direction from illuminated signage?
yes, we do have a separate section on signage, but I think what's being discussed is the lighting component of signage. And I guess one interpretation at this point, in absence of a more specific proposal from you guys on this, is that the site lighting portion of your operations plan has hours of site lighting currently. And, you might want to take a look at that, but I mean, that's one way to interpret the proposal that you've put out there is that the lighting component of the site follows the hours that you've put out here. And again, I'm just trying to kind of set the ground rules so that when we start to deliberate, we can understand that and deliberate on what we can talk about and should talk about and defer what we should defer. Any other comments on the lighting right now? We saw the fixtures last time. I know that's been submitted. You say there's, control, flexibility, dimmability. That sounds good, I guess. We should think about some kind of a process for dealing with that, I suppose. I mean, I guess there's individuals could contact the town, but it may be worthwhile for us to think about another, I don't know, if there's another way to
Condition a remediation process.
we I don't know, some kind of revisiting or I don't know, just the mechanism for making adjustments to the lighting, if it's, monitoring, I mean, you know, you will have the flexibility to constrain those hours, well, I don't know about that, I guess not, because we're kind of balancing between enough light and too much light, right, between public safety and noise or light pollution, right, so I imagine that, what we memorialize here is gonna be hard to deviate from without the police getting involved. It depends really what the tweak might need to be. So anyways, any other thoughts? We can.
Can I just ask, why 4100, Calvin?
Oh, well, that's the light fixture that we selected. That's what comes in as standard.
Because I know that, okay, I know that there's sort of a subjective element here, but like to my eyes, that reads as still fairly cold, and that's, you know, colder light tends to be more penetrating. It tends to be what people are more sort of pestered by, if you will, as opposed to warmer lighting, unless it gets into sort of that sickly range. So I was just curious about like the selection of 4100K, and it's just due to the fixture.
Yeah, it's due to the fixture, and LED lights, it's hard to find a warmer one.
You can find 2600 even, but maybe not an industrial size.
Wayne, do you know off the top of your head I might have asked you this 2 weeks ago, but what our town streetlights are? Let's dig that out just so people have a reference point. I imagine it's cooler than.
I can't imagine a colder light than those LED streetlights.
Yeah.
Right.
Just incredibly bright, incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
That would be
Guys
helpful
keep it
information.
placed,
Sure.
punch it out.
Mark, yep, please.
All of this, including the quality of the light, I mean, this is all within the board's discretion to ask the applicant for something else. If the
Mhm.
board's not happy with it, they want to see some other options, you know, it's certainly well within the board's authority to ask the applicant for it, or to insist on it through a condition.
Yeah, I mean, my general feeling is that I think that we should, I don't have a problem with the fixture, but my feeling is that we should see some options on color, on the temperature, and try to tie it back with our town streetlights, just so everyone has
Or with
a
other
reference.
sites nearby.
Anything, and, you know, a diagram and some other reference points, just because it is a, you know, I personally would like to see it, like I said, consistent across the site, so it's an important decision. As far as the fixture itself, it seemed nice, and in my experience, I've seen a little bit more wiggle room with color temperatures, but I could be wrong about, you know, this might be, that might be true, what you're saying.
I'm just not sure if it, you know, to go a custom color with this fixture, is it $100 more per fixture, or 2 or 3, I don't know.
Understood.
And is there,
The question to be asked
yeah.
is whether so the fixture's gonna come with a lamp. The lamp is what's putting off the color. The question is whether the manufacturer makes a range of lamps, so that you can just swap out the lamp, right? You don't have to change the fixture at all, not to be tone it down too much, but change the light bulb and you change the color of the light. That's the question that needs to be asked for the manufacturer.
and are there, is there pedestrian scale lighting or bollard lighting, or it's just poles and building mounted?
Is there any lighting on that bridge?
Yes, there's under the railing, there's gonna be a recess and a light that goes under the railing.
Okay.
Comments from the public?
Good comment. I feel your pain with lighting, because so many towns, we have actually come across that in the business that we deal with, are passing, lighting, laws and regulations because of the cast off from those lights, like you were saying, especially street lights, everyone went to the LEDs, and they found that the glare was so bad from some of them. And now, when you go into Home Depot and say, gee, I need a new garage light, just for example, and you put it on, you think, this is doing great, and then all of a sudden, your neighbor across the street is like, I can't see him. But it's such an issue because of what's cast off. You know, we actually have towns now researching what kind of lighting, as you probably know, is going to be appropriate for safety. But then again, you've got to watch out where that's spiking off to. You know, making sure that the shields are on, especially these 24-hour operations that are going to be, even for, you know, deliveries for the trucks for grocery, and then you've got the gym. It's very important to get it right, and it's hard. You know.
Is there shielding in the fixture?
Well, they're cut-off fixtures, so
Yeah.
they don't shine down from the horizontal.
Right.
Is that for the parking, the ones for the parking poles?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What was the height on the poles themselves?
The poles are 30 feet high.
Does that include the base? Or is that
Yeah,
above
it
it?
includes the base, so actually
So
they're,
from finished parking lot, the top of fixture is 30 feet,
yes.
including the base.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I had to make an aside. Yeah, I wish that you had control over my neighbor's lights too, ever since they put a light. I can't open my window at night anymore. And I suspect the light from my neighbor's fixture is gonna be brighter than their lighting. I can read in my bedroom. And that's across the street. It's horrible. But my question is, I think, and I guess I have to ask the same question just to make sure. It shows 0-foot candles. I'm trying to imagine this big glowing thing, imagining it actually being visible. But there's a fixture, there's a high wattage fixture shown, two of them next to me, one with a green circle, one without. And then down on the south side, is this saying that we won't see glare or illumination? Is that what this is saying when it says 0-foot candles?
It means that there's no light shining on the ground
Okay.
here. But
Because it's
yeah,
been
you'll see.
cut off or something?
Yeah, so.
I mean, I won't see the actual bulb.
No, you won't, yeah, because it's required to have these full cutoff fixtures anyway, so you can't see.
But I will have two right next door to me.
So lighting done like this, just generally speaking, this is a measure of the direct light from the fixture
Okay.
to a location on the ground. This cannot and does not
On the
provide,
ground.
on the location of this, it's on the
On
ground
the
where it's
ground.
measuring. What this does not do, and it's virtually impossible to do, is bounce light. So if you have a white surface of a building and the light shines on the white surface of the building, you're gonna bounce back. It's not, as you can imagine, this is not gonna look pitch dark from your
No,
house,
this is on the
but
ground.
this is a measure to say how much light is directly coming from the fixture at the ground.
At the ground. So, but this would not be what I might observe as a human being standing 5 feet above the ground. I might see something different.
Correct. But the only way to establish some kind of, what is a comparative level of light
Yeah.
over there versus over here is this software essentially assumes there was light meters everywhere on the ground and
Right.
measures the direct. That it's a different
But
perception
I'm not
than what
on the
you
ground.
stand, well, that's why I understand, there's no way to sort of say, okay, 5 feet above the ground, measure the lighting level around. What it's trying to do is determine where this light fixture casts direct light. So it will not be casting direct light, for instance, on your property. Right, because it's a 0 long before you get to the edge of the property. That does not mean that if you're standing on your property line, when you look across at this site, that it will look dark. You will see the light bouncing off the, even black pavement,
Right, yeah.
bounces some level of lighting.
Oh, no, I'm familiar. I fly and I look down and I can see.
So you understand. But I just wanna make sure everybody here is clear, what this is saying is the direct
That's
light
why I was asking.
on the ground.
And this is also not taking into account the 8 to 10 foot evergreen buffer that you have
But the.
on the edge of
right,
your
but
property
that's
as well.
30 feet. So that's well above the 8 foot.
I'm just saying that will further block light, but from the top of those down in it'll cast a shadow effectively onto your property.
Well, it should be
From indirect.
Yeah, reflected light,
From reflected light.
signage light.
From the moon, you know, it's the same, it's the same thing, you know. I think that's it for lighting. And we have to move on to architecture. Thank you.
Or design.
Okay, so, I presented the larger buildings on the site last time and the design and the materials. We're using the same materials on the smaller buildings, just a little bit different look. So the first building, R6, is right here, and it, is almost 5,000 square feet. It could possibly be a restaurant. The front of the building, which is facing south and west, would be like the entrance of the building. The heights would be around 21 to 23 feet with the ups and downs of the elevation. And then the back, typical for all these buildings is 17'6", where the gutter is the drainage. And so the front of the building, south elevation, right here, has the most features. This building has natural earth tones, and we're using textures to make it an interesting building. And then the awning and whatever the sign is will be the pop of color. So like other buildings, there's cultured stone, ephes, and fiber cement siding, storefronts, and awnings. So then going around to the side here, people will see that from the parking lot as they're driving up to it. So the side is designed to be almost as interesting as the front, with a pop-up and a stone and the same materials. And then the street, the Parker Street side is also designed to have a lot of interest, so.
As you're explaining them, they're different than the elevation names down there. The one that you were just pointing at that's supposed to be east says west. And that one says, so is that, and at least that's on our copy. Is that wrong?
So, this one's west, right here?
That's what it says, which means that it faces the interior.
Yes. And then there's a door there too, so that could be an entrance and this could be an entrance.
Okay, that's not what you just said. I'm sorry, I just got
Yeah,
confused.
sorry if I picked it up. So basically we tried to design the three most visible sides of the building that have a lot of interest. And this particular building has a lot of steps, ins and outs that also help make it interesting with shadow lines.
Can I ask a quick question? I can't tell because it's labeled differently. Sorry, I jumped ahead so long. What, on the, sorry, view 1 and view 4, the white panels, so the two perspective views on the upper right-hand side?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, perspectives.
Yes.
Yep, those two, those white panels. They are labeled here as ethos.
Yes.
Which strikes me as wrong. They are labeled somewhere else.
Yeah, the last building, the note is wrong. It should be ethos. We don't want to have too much PVC panel, the AZEC panel.
So that
it's
is,
just
so
like
if that is the case, then the one comment I would have is that is something of a departure from other buildings that we would look at, in that
Can't be good.
white ethos is a tricky
It makes
thing.
me think
It doesn't stay white very long at all. It's pretty clean. So the one concern I would have with the elevations you're showing here is that band of white ethos which the way it's detailed reads as though it's got battens and, right, that's why I thought it might have been an AZAC panel with a trim on it.
Yeah.
That's an odd detail here that wasn't reflected on the other buildings, and I'd be a little concerned about that material in white. It also is worth noting that it says color varies, which my impression was you were showing us the colors, so it shouldn't vary. I'm looking at the bottom elevation on the bottom
Yeah, just because.
south overall elevation, it says EFS color varies, but I thought we were talking about, no. If we show it as tan,
Yeah,
it's tan.
yeah, I think we mean that this color is not the color that's here. So we're just pointing to Eva's everywhere, I'm not saying that's what the color is, but we're showing the color.
So if you're, I just wanna make sure, if you're showing it here, it's not gonna vary from red to blue, it's what's shown here.
Could we get just a quick rundown on what specifically EFS is and what its characteristics are?
EFS?
Yeah.
So EFS is a, artificial, it's an exterior insulated finish system, it's stucco. Right, so they put a panel up and then they skim coat it and it looks like stucco. But it's not the traditional cementitious stucco, it's an artificial version of it.
Plastic
So-
stucco?
Yeah, it's a building material that is commonly used in retail because it's less expensive than a lot of other materials. You cover large areas of it, but you don't want to put it where people can get their hands on it because it's not, even the most durable versions of it, because it's an insulated panel with a thin layer over the top of it, you can put a hole in it or a dent in it.
Yep.
So you'll see it, we talked about this last time, the EFS is kept mostly above reach range, right, in the masonry and the stone. They've done a good job of putting more durable materials where people can physically get their hands on them.
Well, there's EFS right down to the ground on a lot of these
So
drawings.
that was gonna be.
Oh, sorry.
Unlike
Didn't mean
the
to
last
steal your
version
thunder.
of this, the last set of buildings we looked at, there were only very, very small components of EFS that came anywhere near the bottom. Here, there are bigger chunks. Again, looking at south elevation, south overall elevation. So my comment would be these buildings are not as consistent as the last version, where the amount of EFS at the base is a little more than I would expect.
To go off
Thank
of
you, Mark.
Mark's, to go off of Mark's comments, in discussing consistency, most of the other buildings are a little bit more limited in the materials that you see, whereas this one feels like it's very busy because of the variety of exterior materials on any particular face that the public would be engaging with where the doors are. I mean, you have 4 or 5 materials, different materials, 6 technically if you include the metal canopy. It's just, it's a lot versus the other buildings that have a more consistent appearance. Additionally, it looks like only on some of the buildings that you actually have the vertical headers of the panels and of the windows, or I don't know if they're technically transoms or what if they're cut, but they don't totally line up around the building. They kind of bounce. So if they could be, whether you do panels or you swap out materials there or you don't, it would just be nice to see them all be consistent versus bouncing. And I think that's more prevalent on the south, and it's just a slight, it's just slightly off.
I think it would be helpful for me to, again, I'm gonna dive back into this signage issue, but to the degree to which, we should look at it now, I think it would help me, especially with, these buildings are 360, right? You've got the road and then the developments on the inside, so where's the front door? It's kind of, it's a tricky situation, right? Obviously I know where the doors are, but in terms of the signage, if there was a way to diagrammatically indicate where you intend to hang the signage, and
Especially illuminated.
especially illuminated signage. I mean, I can kind of guess, right? But
Yeah, I mean, it's usually above the door, but we'd have to look at the signage concept plan, because I think that called out exactly where signs go, and
so that's
so
already
I'm
been.
not sure if this building is
So that's already been spelled out then, isn't it?
In
So
concept.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
In the concept plan, we were very specific in the signage conversation about what surfaces of each of these buildings were and were not allowed to have a sign. If you remember, there was a bit of a negotiation as to how many tenants and how many signs and which ones. And these smaller ones, as you know, we restricted. If you're X number of square feet or less, you only get one main sign and a secondary smaller sign because some of them did have two sides. So the signage concept plan is very specific labeling, sign here, sign here, sign here, meaning what side of the facade. To your point, if the facade, right, is you could put it directly above the door, you could put it to the left of the door, you could, right, so there is that level of flexibility, but which surfaces have signs on it has already been established as part of that sign conversation we went through extensively.
You mean,
So this
which
building, for
elevation, the
instance,
south
only
elevation
gets
or
two
east?
signs.
Right.
And it's
Okay.
on,
And the
view
number of
number
signs.
4 and view number 2. Like, we established that in the concept plan. The only question is it, if we were looking at, say, sorry, I'm gonna cheat and go down to buildings R6 south overall elevation, right, that
Mhm.
one. Is it in that white band I was just talking about, or is it above the door? Technically, it could be in one or the other, because those are both facing the direction we agreed could have a sign on
Yeah.
it. That's the question. But it can only be one of them and only on that side of the door.
Well, I think
And
my concern is largely answered, or my question's largely answered by what's already been agreed on. I don't know if we have a desire to get more into it.
we had
But-
discussed last time,
Mm.
when the chairman and I disagreed about what we were covering, that is the meeting we talked about as far as signage.
Mm.
Was, I was concerned that in this kind of conversation, we could go way off the rails on signage when we're talking about elevations and architecture. So the theory was, separate conversation, we're just putting an evening there where we're gonna go around each building, look at the proposed sign locations, make sure they're consistent with the signage approved plan. So, my opinion, Mr. Chairman, is that we would still have a discussion about signage, where the presenter would say, here's where the sign on this particular facade is proposed, it either is or isn't an illuminated version, and this is the size, therefore proving it consistent with the approved concept sign plan. So, my preference would be that's a
As part of this year.
singular discussion as part of this process, so we do
Yeah, yeah.
signage in an evening, and we make sure we're all comfortable with signage.
Agreed.
Just a suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Thank you. I'll try to restrain
So
myself.
noted. It's obvious.
Right, so this is R7, so it's the next building down the line here and right off the main entrance. The design is somewhat similar, but a little bit different. This building is a more rectangular building. It's 6,800 square feet. It could possibly be 2 tenants, a restaurant, 2 restaurants. The heights are all about the same, 17.6 at the back, 20 to 25 feet at the front. The front is facing south. And like the other building, we emphasize the elevations on the 3 sides that are most visible. And in this building, so that all the buildings don't look the same, we gave it a green identity. So we're using the hardy plank siding in green here, and then the neutral stone and other colors, so that it still matches the other buildings. Same thing, the pop-up is hardy plank. There's the other building, it was a stone pop-up. And you're using the metal awning, and the metal canopy here, and the awnings on the 2 side elevations with storefront that's punched openings instead of a band storefront.
So is there a thought about, so you know, these buildings obviously have to have kind of like a back of house, kind of a service side, sort of, right?
Yeah.
Just in terms of the two buildings in relation to each other, it seems like the you know, the back of house side is the north side on both buildings.
Yes.
Is that,
Right, so if you come out of one building, you're facing,
well, I just wanted to bring it up. I don't know if there's a great way to handle it, I suppose, but I mean, I guess I was just trying to think of, like, for example, in, one approach would be to put them facing each other, so you're gonna have an alley of, you know, maybe you could have deliveries happening in the same area, right? I mean, I assume these buildings are serviced from those doors, like, for example, we're on building 7, north elevation. Right, that's the upper, yeah, that one. That would be where you would receive deliveries. Right across the way, you would have elevation, south elevation of building 6, which is like the front door. So, I don't know, I'm
And if
just
building
thinking,
7's a
like,
restaurant.
either we could kind of face them together and have like a little nice kind of, and put the service on the outside of both buildings, or the opposite.
Yeah, right.
I don't know, was
Yeah,
there,
there's pluses and minuses. What we chose to do here in this design was to face the front to what you see when you're driving in. Looking for this one place, you can see the front first. If you put the two fronts together in the middle, then the main entrance has a back facing the main entrance. So, I really think that would be the greatest idea.
so high priority on the south elevation of building 7. Okay, well, I mean, I suppose that makes some sense. And then the south elevation of building 6 is so that when you're driving in, you're seeing
the fronts.
the fronts.
Although it means if you come out of building 6 and R7's a restaurant, then you're gonna come out of that building and be faced with, you know,
Grease
dumpsters
trap.
full of food in 90-degree heat in the summer.
Yeah, are there dumpsters associated?
There's
with
always
these?
something behind a restaurant.
Well,
If you do have restaurants, where would you have the grease trap in that scenario? I mean, many times, if they're not underground, grease traps are,
Yeah, they are.
okay, they still smell, whether they're above ground or underground. The underground smell less, but walking out to that, whether it's 90-degree heat or
Oh,
a
yeah.
60-degree day, it still smells when you're walking out into it. So it is something else to keep in mind. I don't know that any of us are to
I
the
don't
point of
think the
conditioning
solution,
it, but,
yeah.
or trying to say that we have the solution, but it is something to keep in mind.
Two things, one related to that, one unrelated. Going back to the first building, I am slightly confused now that I'm looking at the site plan. The site plan at least implies that there is a drive-through or driveway along one side of the building, but clearly the elevation does not reflect that, or at least doesn't seem to respond to the fact that there could be a drive-through condition there.
Yeah, the reason is, there's just not tenants exactly set for that yet. And at one point, there was thought to be a range, but that's changing, so, if a bank or something comes in that changes, they'll have to come back and show you the design.
is there?
Second, after that,
Okay.
you guys were having,
Give me
an argument that says you do not want to create a ghetto.
Towns are all
Two backs looking at each other, and now you have concentrated the yup, so that, right, there's an argument that says you don't do that. From all of these buildings, you're gonna have people going all the way around. If there's not a back and a front faces a back, it forces the tenants to be better about what their back looks like, because they have another person across the way saying, ooh,
This is
you
our
can't
front.
leave it like that. As opposed to two backs to back, everybody stops caring. So I would say that traditionally in retail setups like this, you try not to have these sort of true ghettos of these are the backs of all of the stores and they get pretty nasty. It's not
Okay.
an uncommon way to do this, just so you know.
Thanks.
Yeah, and in the back, we added the tilted stone and the two tones of colors to just blend it in with the front.
And then the dumpster, comment, so right now the dumpster is planned for right here, so it's really not over here, where you're thinking, it's there, it has to be somewhere where the truck can pull up to it, and it's shared.
Is that enclosed?
Yeah, they'll have enclosures there, so.
So the only comment about this building is, or that I have, is similar to the other one about there being a lot of materials when you look at it, especially the south facade. There's a lot of stuff going on, and the varying roof heights. If those are different storefronts or different tenants, it makes a lot of sense. But if you have a main entrance, generally that's the main point, and then everything else is similar, unless you have, like I said, a bunch of different storefronts. At least in my experience, I know everybody does it a little differently. So I think it would be nice to have a little bit more consistency there, either in materials and or the height.
And again, a lot of low ephes.
So, and then in regard to the drive-through issue, we're talking then about the north elevation of building 6, not showing a drive-through. Is that something that we would have to just consider a change down the road if that was something that you wanted to entertain there, or? I mean, that's an architectural change, right?
Presumably, so right now there's a question for the board, the traffic in the building no longer sort of match, right?
Yep.
The traffic here set up for a drive-through in a building that doesn't accommodate it. If the applicant is planning on actually building the traffic lanes the way they're shown, if not, that's the change they would have to, if they suddenly said, well, there is no drive-through for this building, we're gonna eliminate those drive-through lanes, that's a change they'd have to come back, because they're changing the traffic pattern. On the other hand, I would argue that they're effectively coming to you with a change now by saying, by virtue of there being no openings that accommodate, no canopy, no anything for a drive-through here, architecturally, they're essentially changing what I at least understood was coming when we did the conceptual plan, right? They talked about a drive-through here, and that's part of what it is. I don't know that one or the other is more or less challenging or appealing or not appealing to the board in terms of process. But clearly a change is being proposed from the concept plan in either the traffic or the building. There is no drive-through. Later on, we talked about, you're approving the colors and the layout and all of these buildings. Clearly, if somebody were coming back and adding the canopy and the posts and whatever for a bank, where you've got those teller machines, or a new opening in the facade and a thing where a Kentucky Fried Chicken has their drive-through, that would be a subsequent, bad choice of whatever. But that would be a subsequent change to the facade that would be significant enough that it would require them to come back to you as a change to the approved site plan, one way or the other.
Right, thank you. And I agree that in my estimation, and from what I'm judging by the plan, well, I don't know if we have latest and greatest overall site plan as of today that was just submitted. We do have a mismatch between site plan and the proposal. So if you guys want to just clarify whatever direction you want to go there. And it would seem the good news, in my view, would be that if you're eliminating the drive-through, then you're gaining, a lane's worth of space that you can plant some trees in or something and pretty up that north elevation of that building. So, and you still would then have, I think, 2 lanes on the other side. So we look forward to seeing that.
An amended landscape plan.
Just something, not 3 lanes of traffic. So yeah, sorry.
Snow storage.
You can continue, please. Any other questions on 7? I don't think so.
rest of the colors are neutral with stone and ephes. So the front elevation, again, is facing the main entrance, so. So the north elevation is the front elevation, well, it's the west elevation actually is the front elevation where we're showing the door. So the north elevation is just a nice looking elevation. And then it's the same with the east elevation because it's facing the road. And then the back is the south.
Actually, this one is, I feel like it's just having one less material makes it feel more consistent, especially with the other structures on site, since there's not so much going on with the other ones. The only slight comment I had is it would be nice if the headers and the transom and the awnings align. Especially since you're using the awnings to kind of create an illusion of a transom under there, presuming from the angle that it doesn't look like there's actual transoms under there.
No.
I mean, alternatively, they could be pulled down if you wanted them to line up, but it'd be nice if either they lined up with the cantilever canopy or the headers of that main glass corner feature.
The dumpster for this building is in the southwest of that portion of the parking lot, is that?
Yes.
Okay. So, and you had, I think I'm just going back to the other dumpster, you had indicated on that plan, it's indicated there. It's not showing up in our plan for some reason, but we'll just mark it in. Okay. Okay.
Possibly 2 tenants again, the heights are all the same. And the front of this building is facing north, so it's parallel to the grocery store. And then the two sides are the more interesting sides, with the back facing south. So this building, has the blue-gray siding as the accent color. And all the angles again, a little more glass facing north, if there happens to be 2 tenants, where these can pop out and make a door.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So if there happens to be 2 tenants in this building, one of these glass panels can pop out and be a door. I said 2 weeks ago that the windows are all 6 feet wide, so a double door can fit in anywhere.
I guess the only comment I would have on this building, separate from the others, and I'm gonna have to flip back, because it was more noticeable here, 2-tenant building, based on where, clearly, to your point, that's where the other entrance would have to be, it's gonna be on the north facade, it's gonna be there. The back doors here are odd to me, because directly around the corner, you've got sort of 3 rear exit doors on the east facade. Right there on the, right, which Yeah, right there.
Mhm.
If you've got 2 tenants in here, I'm not sure why you need 4 back doors, and I certainly don't understand why all 3 of the back doors would be right next to each other. I don't understand a configuration of tenants that would allow that to work.
Yeah, so, on every building, 2 of the back doors or side doors are actually, the utility rooms. So, the transformer is here, so it's being, maybe they can go on here, so that's why those 2 doors are there. And the doors, I should point out too, would be painted, the color of the adjacent material, they would be white.
The 2 of those are not tenant doors, those are like building service doors.
Yeah, the sprinkler room and electrical room.
Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, some of the buildings, because the transformer is actually, the transformer's over here, so we had to sneak those doors in, and we put them in, we put a pop up here, so your eye goes to the pop up again, so you have to paint the same color as well.
I didn't even notice in your
Yeah.
elevations, it's clearly not working.
That's it.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public on any of this presentation?
Well, you started the discussion, the reason I raised my hand was because I heard that, getting or sick did not seem to correspond at the same time, so thank you for bringing that up. I just have to ask, since most of these buildings are not against the property line with residences that you can turn your back to, they're visible all the time. Do they need to have a back that's such an obvious back? You know, I mean, I don't know if you're saying we're too stupid to figure out what we're doing, or, but it seems as if it doesn't need to be as plain as it's shown. I mean, these buildings are gonna be visible on all sides, and, to the comment on, building 9, the south elevation is facing the parking lot, where most of the parking would be, and the east elevation is facing and will butter the back of an existing building, with a ceiling, and then there's just a driveway. It seems like an odd place to put so much. This might be a Emerson driveway. If that's gonna be a drive up, then the site plan doesn't show. I thought the only part.
On the supermarket, there is a supermarket.
Oh, well, I'm talking about building 9, that you're, the parking. That you're, so the south elevation is, if I'm reading this correctly, against the parking lot to the south, where most of the people are gonna park and enter that. The east, and that has the very, very plain back, where the east elevation is just facing the road, a lot of trees in the back of an existing, what used to be, I don't know, what it's an office building now, it used to be DCU. And it's just a short drive, and there's a fairly sufficient amount, there's a lot of nice detail on the east back that doesn't really match its location. And final comment, all of these buildings are shown, well, this is a little list of trees, incidental, they're all shown surrounded by trees. But all of these buildings, especially on the north side, all the trees are being removed, everything there, so.
Good point.
The buildings are shown in a very nice setting, that simply won't exist. I don't know if that's, they don't work like that.
Artistic license.
So, yeah, someone told me that there would be such a back, and then between building 6 and building 9,
I'm surprised no
you know,
ultra
the
large style.
siding of the building doesn't,
They usually do that as well.
the back seems a little
That makes it all seem friendlier.
out of kilter. Especially since, especially with 6 and 4, because you're gonna have people on both sides of 6, building 4 and building 7, looking at 6, so.
I mean, thank you. Maybe it goes back to, maybe we could have a little more clarification on the colors, because, again, to me, I think one aspect that stands out of these, back end of the building is this sort of, well, at least on the first two, really all of them, I guess, is that the light band that runs all the way across the top, which is, I understand, the ephes material, which has, I would imagine that there's variation in color that wouldn't really change the cost. So maybe there's an inexpensive way to provide a step up in detail on some of those elevations that, while, there are no windows, that's an architectural response to what's going on inside. But I don't know. Does anyone on the board have any further thoughts on that, on how we can, or how we treat those sides?
Certainly, like, if you think about it, I'm thinking about the, and maybe it's not the best execution of the concept, but if you think about the CVS up in Acton across from Roach Brothers, the back of the building faces the road, and the entrance is really in the back of the site. And most of the building is actually sort of covered with mock windows, if you will, like windows that appear to have shades drawn or curtains, so that it actually has a lot of architectural, or not a lot, let's not be crazy, a modicum of architectural appeal, even though it's the rear of the building.
Yeah, that's right, I agree.
I mean, these are mostly restaurants, so we have the opportunity to do more windows because restaurants like more windows. Like their regular store, almost like CVS.
Right, so it's all sort of mocked up, but just so it doesn't look like, here's the random back of the building.
Or just some color,
You guys-
colors to break it up a little bit, I think.
I think there's probably a lot of ways to do it.
I mean, I would support more windows, if that was, I mean, you're investing a lot in your planting. There'll be a lot of attractive things to look at really in all directions, I think. Buffering, parking, and so forth. It's not like,
Just look at the background of the pictures.
just,
Now, I have a question, if I may, Mr. Chair.
please.
Why did building seven change? Was it number 7 that changed, or
The drive-through?
yeah.
That's 6.
Oh, no, okay, I'm sorry, didn't say.
6 is the drive-through building.
Or just 6, the grocery?
Just 6 is the drive.
Okay, just, okay, that's all right. What was the reason for that?
Well, that will be, just hold it.
Yeah, originally, we thought it was going to be potentially a bank. We're no longer thinking it's going to be a bank.
So there's, right at this point, kind of flexibility in the
Yeah,
design.
right now, so.
This is 7, sorry, 6.
Although it doesn't seem flexible enough if we're presenting a design, like, it's definitely not a bank.
You don't have an actual tenant for it.
Correct.
So it could theoretically change again, depending on the tenant that comes in.
Theoretically, I mean, at this rate, with the design, if we do have to change, we would have to come before the board again for a modification.
At this point, Capital Group is assuming there are no drive-through buildings on the site. That to me is interesting that you don't have a tenant yet, and yet, taking away a drive-through, such that you would have to come back. If at any point in the future you have a bank that shows up with one, you have to come back. As opposed to getting approval for essentially one of the several outlying buildings being a potential bank, and only having to come back if you find a tenant that is not. Right? The parking, the traffic, everything has been done to set this thing up as the only building with a drive-through. we approved that.
They might have to come back anyways.
Well, I think it's my understanding of the NBOB is that each additional drive-through would require a special permit.
Each addition, but they own one. They're essentially saying we're willing to give one up right now. That is what I find odd.
That's in place.
It's good, because they technically through our process today, they own one. If they give that one up, the very first one they need, they gotta come back. As opposed to the very first tenant you need that has a needs a drive-through, and how they do it.
We will look into this further, and then when we come back before the board for the next meeting, I'll answer that.
I think that's just something that you need to clarify first, so that ultimately the board knows what you're asking. Are you officially eliminating the drive-through today, or are you just?
Was there a drive-through plan for the pharmacy in the supermarket?
That's still on the table.
That was, I misspoke. There were two drive-throughs, but there was only one of these independent buildings that was proposed with a drive-through. The other one was proposed with the pharmacy. That was originally.
We had public comment, I guess, on the architecture, and any other comments from the board? I think we did have, architectural presentation on the supermarket at one point. That's been submitted, that's in, so I think we've been through the architecture of the site completely. If I can, yes, sorry.
Just to, I don't know if the board had formally seen the architectural presentation on the residential, or perhaps it had. I had not, I was not here.
Right.
When we did, and I was asked to review it, I did review it, so I feel it's just worth mentioning that having reviewed it, it's consistent with what was previously submitted, the materials, the residential character. So just from completion of my task and checking off the box, that had been reviewed. I wasn't here when you talked about it.
Right.
Would agree that it is consistent with what was proposed.
Okay.
From that point of view, I don't have any negative or other comment relative to the residential submission.
Great, thank you. And then so remaining would be a dedicated conversation on the signage to be scheduled. So with it being 20 minutes to 10, I understand that there's one more item on the agenda. Can we try to keep it to 10 minutes? Is that possible, with the possibility of revisiting if necessary? But if you can just give us the very straight to the point. Thank you.
Daniel Ruiz will give a discussion on the phasing and the sequencing of construction. Thank you.
The posse. I think they can build those buildings just from inside out almost. You don't need a big laydown, they just, but they can like,
Would they just grow it?
just from the inside out.
Just inflates?
Daniel Ruiz, Capital Group Properties.
Thank you.
So this plan is the construction phasing and sequencing. As you can see in the light blue, it depicts which parts of the site are going to be in the first phase of construction and site work. Initial is going to be the main entrance, and then the grocery parcel section, the retail section, and the so R2, R3, R4, and R5 will be constructed within phase 1. And then the residential
and the continuing care will be also either within phase 1 or phase 2. That's still not nailed down.
What's the determining factor there?
When they're gonna start, it's gonna be dependent on that. The front door for the site will be also within phase 1, and then R1 will be in phase 3. R6, R7, and R8 will be within phase 2 also. All of the off-site improvements for the traffic mitigation will all be done within phase 1, 2.
Right, that's mandated by the MOA, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
What is the duration and time of phase 1? Start to finish.
I do not have an exact timetable as to when start to finish it will be. I guess it's dependent on, it will be dependent on when the plan gets approved, and then, so I'd say, I'm not gonna give a definitive answer just until I.
So the one reason I asked that, and the one comment I would have, we have 5 different buildings, 7 if you count the grocery store site. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 and 6.
So 6 different buildings looking for certificate of occupancy. Presumably, if you're saying all of this is done within a phase, then all of the landscaping, site planning, site work, everything in that phase gets done before you get a CO on any one of them. Otherwise, you're in different phases. I just want to make sure that's what you're saying.
Correct.
No COs for any of those buildings until everything in the blue area is done. You might not want to give a definitive answer.
I will get back to the board on that.
That's the question that you need to answer.
Mark brings up a good point. You know, we should really consider that, because
Yeah.
that could complicate things for you guys.
We ran into that originally.
We did.
Yeah, I don't think we wanna constrain our technical.
No,
I
think
further
just wanna
day,
give you
further
an
day
agency
to
to
think about that.
But I think what I would imagine, based on the question that was asked in the last meeting, is the conversation about landscaping and some of the things that the neighbors care about in phase 1. That's why I'm tying this to a CO
So
of a
it's a good
building in
point.
phase 1.
You're talking about the landscaping on the south.
The
and north.
buffers and
Yeah.
things like
That
that.
will be done before any of the work is started. That'll be the first thing that's going to be completed for the.
Then that's phase 1.
Right, yeah.
That's why I think you guys wanna be, I think you wanna think through this, and I think you wanna be really, really specific.
Okay.
If that gets done before you're starting construction of, say, building 6, then that's phase 1.
Okay.
And building 6 is phase 2. That's gonna be a key conversation point as far as abutters and neighbors and everything. When does that landscaping get finished relative to when you open the door?
Another,
Yeah.
level of specificity.
I think it'll be really, really important.
I think another aspect of this, which was brought up, is that we really should try to, like, for example, phase 3 in red is limited to the footprint of a building. In reality, you're gonna have more of the site. You're gonna need laydown in other areas. So I would really show, the entire area that will be, construction zone during phase 3 and then completed as part of each phase. That would go also, like, for example, you've got building, I forget which one it is, in the lower right, sorry, right on the road, the larger purple, you've R8, you've got a realistic zone carved out for that phase where you could imagine that whole, subparcel or whatever would be. I would imagine that the same thing would apply to those 6 and 7, that probably that entire chunk of land would be part of that phase. So I think, give that some thought. And I agree wholeheartedly that the off-site improvements, the buffers, and even the sort of infrastructure roadways and storm drainage should probably be broken out independently
Okay.
and identified, because, and I need to catch up, we can catch up all later on the, but from the way that it was described by our peer consultant, these documents can be restrictive and quite, and do carry quite a lot of weight going forward. So, any other, I'm just trying to give quick comments so that you guys can take a pass
Yep.
at revisions. Any other, things that stand out to board members that you want to, pass on?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think the applicant presented a good first discussion. This is what we asked you to do, phasing. We appreciate that. But I think to everyone's point, I just think you should just think it over a little bit more. You may want to bifurcate it into smaller pieces.
Yeah, sure.
We don't care if you said 8 phases, right? As long
Yeah.
as it all made sense to everybody.
And I think durations would help. We don't need to know start dates. Nobody knows start dates, but, and even a range of durations.
6
8 to 10
months,
weeks.
12 months, something like that. Just, I think, to the chairman, I think it makes sense to do that if you could.
Comments from the public on phasing?
You know, one comment, and it's related to the comment that was made. Because I believe I heard originally this in the grocery store was number 1. But my question is, within this big breakdown, that's phase 1, or any of these phases, will you build a building in that phase if you do not have an occupant into that? So you would have to have
We would need
signed
tenants.
tenants
Yes,
before you start all of those.
correct.
Just briefly, I mean, a change to this phasing plan down the road would require that the applicant come back again.
It depends on what this is included. This is not part of the site plan package.
Mm-hmm.
Could that be something specified in the decision?
I think
Well-
you might want to discuss that further. I mean,
Yeah.
because honestly, I mean, I deal with construction every day, and most likely something's gonna change for these guys.
I think maybe
It
the,
seems silly to have to come back for something minor.
I agree, and mainly what we should, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that I think we should identify from our point of view what is important about phasing. You know, clearly we talked about the buffers, that's already been, so a lot of the phasing has already been clarified in the MOA already, so, but if there are other aspects of phasing that we need to see, want to see, then, and then we can allow them to have the appropriate amount of flexibility to the degree that you're asking for. You know, I would want to give you flexibility within, you know, as long as you're providing the key things that, you know, are of concern to the town. So we'll talk more about that.
In a condition, you know, that is somewhat restrictive yet somewhat flexible. I'm
Mhm.
sure we can find a way to do that.
Okay.
You say the important things, outline the important things, and flexibility, we don't have flexibility.
Thank you. So looking back, it seems like there are aspects of, maybe not traffic, but of the other 4 things that we touched on tonight that we're gonna hear back from you on. It sounded like from the traffic point of view, that's closed out.
I think it may make the most sense if we'll coordinate with Bill, and speak with, Mr. Nemser and try to schedule, organize, what we've addressed tonight.
Mhm.
We need to refine and, come back to you in more of a, and convey it in a more specific manner. And before that meeting on June 13th, we'll try to, put together some sort of a bullet point list.
Mhm.
As well in advance as possible.
I guess for Mark's benefit, if the signage was ready, I don't know where that stands, or how much advance notice you'd need of that, or if you are able to attend the next meeting. That's one thing that we could tackle. The stormwater, again, needs to be at the appropriate level of development to bring that forward, so I'm not suggesting we tackle it right now, but just, we should we should try to do that soon, meaning identify those items that are appropriate to cover. We have 2 weeks from tonight. 3 weeks. 3 weeks.
Snow management of snow.
Well, I mean, I guess I was thinking of the larger stormwater proposal in general, which does relate to the snow, but is broader.
We need to really get the closure.
Yeah, right.
From the working group meeting we had on Wednesday, Bowler indicated that they probably needed at least a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
So that may fall into that timeframe.
Okay.
We won't be able to, if they give us something 2 weeks from now, we're not gonna be able to review it.
Yeah.
In a couple of days, but it certainly could be explained to the board what has been settled on.
Well, in the interest of just speaking broadly here, I mean, we're talking about the 13th. We're talking, I mean, we're well into July, I think. I mean, with only 2 meetings in June. So in the interest of looking ahead at wrapping things up, I spoke to Bill tonight about beginning to compile some of the things that I think we've all reached some consensus on in terms of conditions, things that you've agreed to, just kind of laying out in paper that will start to circulate the various, all the details that that we need to keep track of, so that we can really just start rough drafting, our findings. And so I'll be working with Bill, and we'll be having communications with Wayne and Barbara and Mark and everyone to try to pull that together. So there will be an effort behind the scenes to try to get all this, organized. I think that from the board's point of view, or from, my point of view in terms of organizing this, I would encourage the other board members to please speak out on a one-on-one basis to Bill Nemser about specific pieces of information that you might think we need, that are outstanding. And I think we'll revisit this topic again at our next meeting, but certainly offline. Behind the scenes, we can communicate with you guys if there are specific things that we need, so that we can expedite, the process of getting those answers before we can close the hearing. Yes?
Mr. Chairman, since you had asked earlier, if there's a signage package a week for me in advance of when a meeting, so if the meeting's gonna be the 13th and the applicant's ready for that, if I can get it a week in advance so I have enough time to look at it,
Mhm.
and have a dialogue with the developer to make sure I understand it, would be helpful.
Thank you. And so,
With the Wayne stuff too.
yeah,
Pretty much we need to minimum a week.
Some of the stuff is
Probably longer.
I mean, this
the
is
stormwater is
the applicant
complicated.
Wanted to kind of wait until we kind of reviewed everything before they resubmitted a plan. I cautioned them that that's fine, but it's gonna take a little bit longer to review everything again.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have to look at responses to site plan comments, drainage comments, could be a lot of things.
Well, and I guess as it's appropriate, we have, it sounds like 2 other concurrent public hearings related to stormwater, that, I mean, I guess it really is on the applicant to coordinate those efforts and responses to those efforts, but we just need to be aware that there are other conversations going on, and there may be other changes or conditions that are being laid out there that are gonna affect what we're doing.
So for the next meeting, tentatively, we wanna wait and just kind of see what we're.
It's really in your court.
And I would defer to, at least within the next couple of days, have the ability to speak with Bill.
None of us wanna be here in August,
Agreed.
so it's gonna get harder and harder to keep all of us here, so. All right, I move to close the public, or I move to continue the public hearing, I wish, to June 13th at 7 PM.
Second.
All in favor? Thanks, we'll see you on the 13th.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mark.
Minutes.